Hey there, romance nerds! Welcome to another episode of Raging Romantics. I'm Jen.
I'm Jackie, and we are proud to have you. We are librarians at Northern Onondaga Public Library, and we are also romance nerds. Now, if you're wondering what this podcast is about, wait for it.
Romance!
Specifically, the romance genre of books. We are going to be talking about anything and everything having to do with romance. This could be bad heroines, good heroes,
swoon-worthy endings, snappy dialogue,
happily ever after, the genre, the tropes, anything and everything.
So with that being said, sometimes our material will be a little too sensitive for younger readers. If you feel the need to wait until they go to bed, we will be here for you.
We would also like to issue just a general trigger warning for some of the things that we do talk about. We will always try to issue specific trigger warnings for each episode so that you know what you're getting into. Now, without further ado, are you ready, Jen?
Oh, I've been ready, Jackie.
All right.
Let's rage! Hey, Jackie.
Yeah.
Why do vampires make bad artists?
Why?
Because they only ever draw blood.
Yeah, that was bad. It was bad.
Sucks to be you, I guess.
Thanks for that. Anyways.
Welcome back, guys, to the second part of our amazing vampire series in Raging Romantics.
Because it's spooky season, and everybody loves
season.
A good spooky story.
So here we are, looking at two of vampire literature's brightest and greatest.
Oh God, no.
Maybe?
Sparkliest. The most sparkles.
Like we alluded to last time, we are going to be talking about Christine Fian's Dark series.
And Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. We'll look at the whole series, although not
boy.
Midnight Sun, because I refuse to read it.
I mean...
I won't.
That's fair. No. I can't fault your commitment to the podcast just on that.
Thank you. I mean, it's basically just the same story. It is the same story. We know how it ends. Renesmee, Jacob, it's done.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways. So, vampires, if you guys haven't listened to the last episode, go do that. We talk a lot about where the vampire literature and romance came from, its influence, if we like it, if we don't like it,
obviously
spoiler
we
alert,
like it.
We like it.
I mean, it'd be dumb to do a whole podcast of something we hated.
Well, we're going to do that.
Oh, that's true.
Down the road. We will definitely do that, so stay tuned for that. All right, Jen, tell us a vampire story.
Christine Fian is probably one of the better-known vampire romantic authors. She started her series, the Dark series, in 1999 and has since written about, I think it's 30 books at this point.
Wow. When did you start reading her?
I actually started reading her in high school, which maybe was not good. Maybe middle school. I don't know. I was way too young to read her, considering what's in those books.
I think when we were that age, like, Supernatural was so big.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I started with Sherilyn Kenyon pretty much, so it's...
Sherilyn Kenyon was definitely one of my firsts, too. Christine Fian, though, was very special to me because it was one my mother recommended. In hindsight, maybe she shouldn't have, but she did it, so thank you, Mom! When the series opens up, the Carpathian race is nearly extinct because they have not had many women born to them. Their children really struggle to survive the first year of life.
So that's something that's interesting, is that a vampire is born and not made.
Yeah, so actually, the only vampires that can be made, as Dark Prince realizes, psychic women who are human can actually be converted into Carpathians and become life mates.
Are they then vampires? Do they have to, like, drink people's blood?
They drink their mate's blood, so it's not super terrible. Really, the only time you're a vampire is if you're really happy to kill people, if you really get off on it and you're so excited to.
Are those bad vampires?
Those are the bad vampires. The Carpathians are the good vampires. The thing about the series is it's very binary. There's not a lot of gray in it. All of the women are good. It's absolutely impossible to become a vampire because the women have the light of the soul.
Okay.
They are all good, all great, just these wonderful human beings, if the ones that are human, and then the men need them to live. Or they go
you're
crazy.
Very cynical about that.
I wouldn't say cynical. I don't want to. I'm sorry if my tone is giving that away. I want to be very clear. I actually really do like Christine Fian. I will on occasion hate read her though, because sometimes there are some things that are a little ridiculous.
Such as?
So
I have an example, but you.
So in the beginning, I think when the story was more about the Carpathians and the humans coming to compromises and understandings with each other and not really I think it worked for me when it was emotional and when it was about communication and when it was these two very different people, the super old-fashioned guy who's been alive 2,000 years and the modern woman who still wants her independence, and how that melds together, I think was really interesting to me. Since then, because she's had 30 books in the series, she's had to add in all of these crazy things like dragons and mages, and there's these 5 evil vampire brothers that want to kill all the Carpathians and enslave the humans, and it's gone off a little bit off the rails for me. So still, it's the best when we are talking about, well, you're my life mate, I want to protect you, and the woman has to be like, hey, I have a brain and I can think, just talk to me. I think that's really when I like the series a lot.
Okay.
And I will say, it's a pretty sensual, dark, intense series.
It is.
Like, it's not a fun series. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I read a really fun book, I get all like, giddy and I skip around the house.
That's me right now with the book I'm reading. I'm like, ah!
Lately, though, it feels like it's been forgotten in favor of these more complicated, elaborate plots. I don't know if you have a feeling about that. I've actually read something like 23, 25 of her books. You've read 2.
I've read 2. I've read one of the first and one of the newest. So I'll say it off the bat. Christine Behan isn't my favorite.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is because of her writing style and just the way that she writes sequences.
The writing is very weird. It does feel like it's being told to me as opposed to me seeing it.
Yeah.
It's very info dumpy.
Yes, very much so. So, I mean, the first one I was definitely more into. It felt like there was much more at stake. See, I can do it too.
I got her, folks.
It felt like there was much more that I had to like worry about and had to focus on, and I was much more invested in the characters. But it was still, like you said, info dumpy, where she was throwing a lot of information at you. And she does a lot of classic vampire attributes, like super speed, super sexy, super old, all the supers.
Super rich.
Super
all rich, which
so
is
in the book that I wrote, it was actually really funny. There was a line of the heroine was like, I came from the streets, I have nothing. And the hero is like, don't worry, I'm really old, I've got a lot of money. And I was like, okay, I did like that. So, she does a lot of like these classic things, but then at the same time, I think the series has just gone on for so long that I feel like, lady, it's time to break.
Oh, I don't know if I would agree with that, because I still really like the relationship aspect of it. I think she needs to maybe put a rest to the more elaborate plots, save that for another series, because she has other series where it is very over the top as well. I really enjoyed it when it was just these two people figuring out how to live together.
I mean, we see this all the time in TV shows.
Yeah, it just jumped the shark.
Like Supernatural or Vampire Diaries, all these things where it starts off super simple and everybody gets super into it and really invested. And then all of a sudden they have to start throwing all these weird
extra
plot
things.
Devices in just to kind of keep the story rolling. And sometimes it's really good, like
sometimes
Supernatural.
Yeah.
It's great.
I think one of the coolest aspects of the newer plots is you find out the reason that Carpathians are going extinct is those same...
Spoilers!
Spoiler! If you would like to hear, if you don't care about hearing.
Fast forward a little bit.
Fast forward. But the mastered vampires that we've been talking about in Dark Legacy and the newer things, they've actually created these parasites to infect the soil that Carpathian women sleep in. So it infects them, and then that in turn infects the babies when they breastfeed. And it's like this weakening agent that slowly kills them off.
So it's really interesting. The book that I read, and trigger warning, rape, consent.
Yeah, lots of rape and consent.
I read Dark Legacy, which came out more recently. I think it was like 2017.
Yeah, roughly. 17, 16.
And so the main character is a human woman who is telepathic. And there's some issues with her telepathy. And, like, she's, like, super special because of it. She can repel vampires. And I'm like, okay.
That too, and she's in the dream, too.
Yeah, in the dream. But so...
Or the dreaming.
She's been part of the series for a couple books now, and in one of the previous books, she rescues children from, like, the bad vampires, pretty much. But in so doing, she is put into captivity, or she's held against her will, and there are these vampiric monsters, pretty much, that have bear-like claws, as she describes them, and they literally pin her to the ground so that the evil vampire,
don't ask me to pronounce it. Valim. It looks like Valium, but without the U.
Vadim, something like that.
V. This gross
we'll
guy.
call him V.
Yeah.
He rapes her with his hands, and then
injects her with the parasites, and somehow she gets pregnant by him raping her with his hands. It's kind of like artificial insemination.
Yeah, in a very twisted, creepy
weird way that I'm just like, what the... I literally said, what the blank? So I had some issues with the believability of the story, with the writing style. So yeah, basically, I'm not the biggest Christine Feehan fan. I can appreciate...
Okay. I'll like you anyway.
Thank you. I can appreciate we have other interests in common. I can appreciate how she really influenced the genre. I mean, she was one of the OG vampire writers, really, besides...
And she was definitely one of the first ones to combine it with the soulmate.
Yeah.
And make it very magical in that sense.
And you were telling me an interesting point that you came across was she was one of the first to really combine, like, the super sensual, sympathetic creature, which we talked about last time, into a romance plot device.
Well, I understand why you don't like it, and I will continue liking you, I guess, even though you don't like one of my original vampire series that I ever read as little baby Jen.
Oh, but right, so I was talking about how like, they were monsters in True Blood. Yeah. We do still have the monsters in Feehan. Yeah. And the characterizations of alpha holes in Feehan are definitely a thing.
And I will say, an alpha hole can be really satisfying to see.
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to see them grovel to get back in their good graces.
Everybody loves a redemption story.
Oh, yeah. Like, that's my favorite thing ever. But sometimes she goes a little bit over the line, especially when it comes to things like consent. There are instances with some of her heroes where they don't fully explain what's happening to them. So they'll meet a human woman, and they immediately bind them to them, which means they say these ritual words that let them...
They're basically wedding vows.
Yeah, they're wedding vows, but very spiritual and supernatural, so it literally links the two people together, and you can't escape them. Like, they can find you wherever you are. The most permanent tracking device ever, I guess.
Yeah.
And also, when they start doing the blood exchanges, it takes 3 blood exchanges to go through conversion, which ends up being incredibly painful.
So pretty much he drinks her blood, she drinks his blood.
So that's not always fully explained what's happening. So there would be these scenes of them waking up with no understanding of why they couldn't suddenly eat meat, why they had a sensitivity to the sun, why they felt so depressed and horrible without the man, because of course he is off in the ground and they're living their lives above the ground. And I think that really bothered me. Yeah. Because it wasn't until the most recent book I read that she does a good job acknowledging, I think, of what the human women are going to lose by converting. Like, oh, cool, you're going to get this man, yay, life mate, cool, and he's a great guy, and he's rich,
money
and blah, blah, blah.
And power!
Yes, money and power, handsome, great sex. But you're also going to lose the sun. You're also going to see your family and friends die. I think it's going to be really stressful on your brain to see history change, personally.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever helped a 50-year-old with a smartphone.
Too many times.
You are going to be that 50-year-old for the rest of your life if you're an immortal being. It'll never stop. And then I just don't want to be around, personally, for when they put phones in my head. Because you know tech is going that way, where it's like a part of your body.
Yeah. I don't know.
There's a lot of sacrifice, too, with these books, and it bothers me sometimes when the life mates are like, well, you're the other half of my soul, you're gonna save me, I love you, let's just go ahead and do it. Definitely there are books where it's better than others, but I could tell you too, if I did decide to be a Carpathian, that I am eating a feast the day before. I'm gonna sunbathe. Like, I just want some planning.
Yeah.
You know how much cake I would eat if I knew that was gonna be the last cake I ever had?
Steak, bacon, wine.
But, you know, I could see that being a problem with other vampire books aside from Feehan. What really annoys me about Feehan sometimes...
Rant.
Just like a little baby rant. I'm a calm, reasonable person who is very chill. But the first time I actually matched the age of one of Christine Feehan's heroines, so when I usually read it, or when I used to read it, I was like... little baby Jen. I didn't know what my early 20s would be like or what I would be like as a person. And then I finally matched the age where she was, I think, 24, and I might actually have been 25. So, very close in age, though. She was such an old lady.
Oh.
She was...
I'm an old lady at heart.
No, I know. There's an old lady at heart, but then there's how you behave and how you act and how you talk.
Sometimes I'm in all of those.
How often you think about your student loans.
All the time.
Like, this girl was a grad student. You know how often I think about my student loans? If you're a grad student, you're thinking about them constantly.
All the time. You're eating ramen because you have to pay student loans.
The first thing you think when you get a rich vampire lover...
Paying everything off.
Pay my loans.
You're paying off my car. You're paying off my loans. You're buying me a house. You're buying me a boat. I'm just listing things. If anybody's listening who wants to buy me those things, go for it. Thank you.
We'll put our wish list up eventually. But I think just Christine Feehan is so bad at the slang, at the interests, at the attitude. It just took me out of the story, and it was really frustrating. And it very much felt like a 50-year-old cosplaying as this early 20s person. And I'm sure Christine Feehan feels young. I know I feel young, even though
she's writing these sexy vampires.
Yeah,
so
she's got to feel a little bit young. But I think she's just stuck in her own youth. I don't think she can put herself well into the millennial mindset.
Yeah.
Into the generation.
Now that you say that, these books feel old to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm reading Talia Hibbert now, who is, like, young, she's funky, she's fresh. I can't believe I just used the word funky in the description.
Hi, Grandma.
Hi, sorry. I'm old. So the writing itself just feels really, like, dated and very stuck in that kind of 90s
that's
writing
a really good way to describe it, because I've been really struggling with why I really like aspects of this book, but the writing style trips me up.
Right.
I don't... Maybe you guys have an answer for us. Let us know below in the comments now that we're all YouTubing.
If we have comments.
If we have comments.
That part out.
Email us. Let us know why it feels like my eyes are tripping over the words sometimes in Christine Feehan's books.
Go to nopl.org. That's NOPL.org and visit one of the locations near you.
And just let us know, because really, I want to like Christine Feehan. There's a lot to like.
Yeah.
But she's so old.
In the best possible sense. Also the worst possible
I am dying to know what her audience is, and I couldn't find that information online. I don't know if it's all other older women like her.
If you look at the Goodreads reviews, which I know it's a very, like, super sect of Goodreads that we think about, but it is women, like, our age, late 20s, mid 30s, but there are a lot of, like, 40, 50-year-old readers. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a big span of millennials up through, what is that, boomer? That's not quite 60s? Boomer. 60s.
Yeah.
Who knows? I'm sorry. I'm terrible with this sort of stuff. What are names for things? We talk about traumatic events a lot in psychology having such an impact on the psyche. We talked about this in the last episode briefly, how the death of Feehan's son was what inspired her to write this. So I wonder how much that mindset that she started writing this in is just still, like, in her brain, and she doesn't really want to escape from it. Well, here's a deep psychological chat for you.
I mean, to be fair, it's working for her.
Yeah.
Like, she's sold millions of books. She's constantly on the bestseller lists.
She's a queen. She really is.
I mean, God knows how much money she's made.
She's still one of the OG vampire writers who's still writing vampires.
Yeah, she's still a very big deal. She gets interviewed by mainstream people.
I know.
Which is a big deal.
Someday, Jen. Someday we'll be interviewed. Maybe. For our antics.
I know. I think overall it's a good series to check out if you are into vampires, if you like the Fated Mates. If
Literally.
You like...
Come check it out from the library.
Hey!
2 plugs in under 5 minutes.
Look at you. I think it is a good series to try out.
Yeah.
And definitely let us know what you think.
We recommend reading the older ones.
Yeah, definitely the older ones. I reread the older ones, and it just hits different. There's just something really special, I think,
They're
at the
so
beginning.
steamy, too.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this, too. The word choices has completely changed for her between the older and the new ones.
How so?
So the older ones, you got a lot more of the velvet-wrapped rod.
Oh, God, that was so
shaft,
90s.
And her
mound.
Yeah, just all the...
Center of pleasure.
Not quite the ridiculous Harlequin words, but definitely she was not using the kind of slang we see more frequently in romance now.
Well, that's interesting, too, because in reading her next one, sorry, there's a trigger warning language advisory coming up. And the one I just read, which came out a couple years ago, she uses the word cock.
Yeah. No, and she does all the time. So she'll use the male anatomy. I have not seen any slang for women yet.
Besides, like, breast.
Yeah, like what? But that's not like a real slang.
No, I mean that's an anatomical anatomy.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that she has evolved into writing different kinds of steamy scenes, but still her writing feels very much in the past.
So that could be a whole interesting conversation there. So a lot of the times we talk about how, like, women are sexualized in pop culture. In romance novels, something I love, it's the men who are sexualized.
Yeah!
We talk about their bodies, their buns, Their abs, their pecs, peck popping love right there.
And they can't do anything about
it. They can't. And it's great. I think that's maybe why Sheehan doesn't write such like that. She describes more the male anatomy because, like, we're women. We know our anatomy.
Yeah, we know.
Kind of.
Yeah, we got
we maybe might know what's
depending
there.
Depending on where you went to school, I guess.
All sorts of things. Slash, what the hell is this? Wake up in the morning. Sorry. Tangent, guys. Oh, gay vampires.
Not a thing yet. So
Oh, they have to be a thing in smut.
Oh, they're a massive thing in erotica. Yeah, there are a ton of gay vampires.
I love it.
And obviously, I mean, there are, like we talked last time, Camilla was a big... Yeah. It's in the background. It's just, it's hard for the mainstream to catch up, I think. So it's not quite in mainstream yet, but to be fair, vampires aren't really as big a thing. So I think if vampires rise again, I think we'll definitely see gay vampires.
Rise again.
I think if we resurrect them one day.
I'm waiting for the YA to come out where we have a transgender and a gay vampire just fanging away in the corner. I am here for that. I will read that in a heartbeat, folks.
But YA in general, we don't see the kind of supernatural stuff we grew up with. It's either contemporary or it is straight up fantasy, completely different world.
Yeah.
It's not really magical realism. I don't see that as often. I do see it, but I feel like growing up, Twilight was definitely more a 2000s invention than a 2020 invention, which I think is an amazing
great segue
to torture Jackie by forcing her to remember those amazing Twilight days.
I never want to go back to those days. I mean, yeah, they were the golden years, but so Twilight came out in 2000, we talked about this, 2006?
Something like that,
2006. 2007.
Whatever.
So it was right when I was getting into middle school, pretty much. And let me just say, I think I was so into Twilight because I was not a good-looking kid. When I was younger, oh my god, it was terrible. Like chipmunk cheeks galore. It was bad. And so when I hit puberty, thank God, I turned kind of normal looking. And that was when Twilight came out. So this is my psychology behind this. So Twilight came out, and the main character is, she's brunette, she's pale, beautiful, but doesn't know it. And I was brunette and pale, and I really wanted to be beautiful. And especially in YA.
Yeah.
And so it came out, and I was like, I could really reflect or see myself reflected in this main character. Plus, I was a very impressionable youth at that age.
So, aside from seeing yourself reflected in Bella, was there like a wish fulfillment in having Edward Cullen lust after Bella and be like so obsessed with Bella?
Okay, so I was Team Jacob.
Oh, okay. Well, was there a wish fulfillment and Jacob desperately wanted to be your friend? And...
more than friend, please. Jacob... He was smoking oaken, man. Yeah. And I think it was just the dedication factor, the loyalty factor, the do anything for you.
And that's very common in Christine Feehan, too. It's interesting that that's very much a theme that goes across even YA and adult.
So we'll jump gears here for you folks, the few folks out there who haven't read Twilight. I'm really so
jealous. Lucky. I just want to know what went right in your life.
Like, where are you? Let us know where you are. So if you've never read Twilight before, Twilight is a young adult YA. We'll call it YA from here on out.
Yeah, it's YA.
It centers on a family of vampires, the Cullens, who are good. They're vegetarians. They only drink animal blood. And Bella, who is our heroine, beautiful, but she doesn't know it. She's human. Who they don't really talk about like fated life mates, but it almost kind of seems that way because Edward smells Bella. He smells her.
Smells Bella.
And I do like this depiction in the start of the book. Like he like makes the face and she's like, oh my god, do I smell bad? Yeah. I did love that part.
She smells too good.
She smells too good. She is just so alluring and she tempts him so much. And that's pretty much the whole series. Edward is just so tempted.
And I think too, besides the smell, he can't hear her thoughts.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really big deal in terms of maybe it's not exactly a fated mate, but it is very much Bella is the special one. There is something very
special. She's special.
Yeah, she's special. Thank you. I could not think of a better adjective, so I'm not special.
I'm not special like that. I'm not telepathic at all. I hardly know what I want, let alone other people. Of course, we get the whole love triangle because it's a young adult where we have the werewolves who come in.
Actually, I feel like that's our natural impulse to be like, oh, it's an adult, blah, blah. But wasn't that kind of the first big love triangle YA?
That's a very good question.
Right? Is that just... I do want to talk about this, and I'm not saying Twilight shouldn't have been vilified, but
It did a lot of things.
It did a lot of things. I don't necessarily... I don't know what point I'm getting, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but as soon as you said it, I was like, they really weren't, though.
That's like, fair enough.
It's a weird...
I mean, so... Obviously, everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people now hate on Twilight. Yeah. Midnight Sun literally just came out, like, what, a month ago, 2 months ago? And I am like, I will not read it, etc., etc.
I actually did try to read it before she published it officially, because she has been working on this.
Wattpad or something.
No, it wasn't even that. She had started this years and years ago, this project, but it got leaked.
Yeah.
So she got really mad and just put it on her website what was done. So I read, like, the first 6 chapters or something of it, and it really did not thrill me. It wasn't anything.
And that's the thing, I think,
it wasn't anything groundbreaking.
It was groundbreaking when it came out. And I think outside of True Blood, it was the first big, like, universe of creatures interacting with the human world.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, so... I can't really think of vampire stories that interacted with werewolves. Underworld.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
But I will say Underworld's not as big as Twilight.
No.
I think Twilight had something about it that made it so interesting to a larger group of people, so it could be mainstream. And then it had all of the stuff in it that made people hate it.
Yeah. Now we hate it.
Yeah.
Back then everybody's like, oh my god, I love this so much.
I don't know. I saw both, though. And especially because teen girls loved it.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like, is this safe? Is it dangerous? Are these girls stupid?
No. We're just reading books. I mean, yes, a well-read woman is extremely dangerous. Because we know a lot of
Bella
stuff.
Bella could have learned how to say no, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Edward didn't. So sorry for interrupting your thought, but I think that's something we want to explore a little bit more of.
Why people came to hate it.
Yeah, I think
we need to talk about what Twilight did.
Yeah, so what did Twilight do?
Twilight, as much as we want to hate on it now, it did a lot of stuff in both YA and in mainstream media. So in YA, it was really kind of the first vampire thing that happened, huge paranormal
Would you
series.
argue, too, that it's probably one of the first giant mainstream YA things, too?
Harry Potter.
But that's not really YA, that's middle school.
Which is YA.
Yeah, YA is more teenagers, though.
We could argue this till we're blue in the face.
That's fair. Okay, the middle school YA thing is kind of like a librarian argument.
It's a very heated argument.
Care
all the normal people are like, we don't care. Get to the sparkly part. I also think that it introduced the love triangle really well and in an interesting kind of new argument. I can't think of any YA that I read before this in this case.
It's tough. I was
so young.
So you're like 2 years younger than me, so I guess I probably would have been in high school.
So if it's 2006, I would have been 13.
Yeah, 14. I graduated 2009 from high school, so I guess I was 15, right?
Yeah, so you would have been like 8th, 9th grade, something like that. I'm trying to do math.
I did read a lot. I just think it's so curious looking back, because the only reason I ever picked Twilight up was my teen librarian recommended it to me.
And then you hated it.
Eventually. It took a minute, though.
So I will fully say I was a Twihard.
Okay.
I went to the midnight premiere of Breaking Dawn Part 2. Like, I was there.
Yeah.
I imagined myself as Renesmee in Jacob's arms. I was all for it, man.
I didn't go that far. I did like it. I owned the books. I definitely remember actually binge reading the Twilight series.
Oh, yeah.
When I was getting ready to graduate, because I had all this free time in between graduation practice. It wasn't until later that I was rethinking it, and I was like, was this actually good? Like, what did I like about this? And I think you do get caught up in Bella feeling like you, and the love aspect of it, and...
So here's something I liked.
Yeah.
Is that they took it and made it a movie that was just as successful as the book. Maybe even more so, because it was a movie. And really the only time I'd ever seen this with books that I liked was Harry Potter.
Okay. And the first one was really good. And actually was really true. And I think when they went to the male director, though, it got a little...
Well, yeah, because suck. But...
Yeah, they should have stuck with the first director.
I mean, so the movie is never as good as the book. We all know this. But what the movie did was it really introduced it to an audience that didn't necessarily want to read the book, because they're like, ew, vampire book, why would I want to read that? And then they see the movie and they're like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting, and then they go read the book, and it opens up a discussion of audience, I guess you could say.
Let me break in, because I just read this really interesting article that talked about how one of the things Twilight was really good at was creating this, I loved this term, this cultural citizenship.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And they meant it in a way that pretty instantly, maybe it took a little bit, but pretty instantly people self-divided into people that either loved Twilight or they hated Twilight. And it wasn't just that your opinions of Twilight could be lukewarm. You were very one or the other in a camp.
Yeah.
So then I thought that was just a really interesting take on it, and it does remind me of what it was like to be like, oh yeah, I'm Team Edward, and being really excited about that. And then, because I was in both camps, I really liked Twilight, and then I really hated Twilight.
Oh yeah.
And I got a lot of enjoyment out of being in either camp.
Yeah.
Of like really loving Twilight or really bashing Twilight like we are right now.
I mean, you kind of see the same thing with Harry Potter houses. Like, I'm a Gryffindor, I'm a Slytherin. Oh.
Yeah. I think it's kind of natural that we not sort each other. Maybe
we totally do, especially in high school and middle school. All those raging hormones are going around, and everybody's trying to find out what clique they're in, who their friend group is, where they themselves want to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that by us being able to polarize ourselves into Team Edward, Team Jacob, Gryffindor, Slytherin,
hate Twilight,
yeah,
love Twilight.
Exactly. Being able to really like identify ourselves that way gave us something to
bond us over.
Yeah, bond us
talk
over,
about and
identify ourselves with.
Like, I don't love Twilight. I'm way smarter than those people.
I'm gonna go sit with those people in the back of the room and read To Kill a Mockingbird.
Or, oh no, I love Team Jacob because I'm not into people who watch you sleep. You know, I think it was definitely an easy way of not only bonding with other people, but judging other people.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what camp you were in.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that is really one of the massive appeals that we've kind of missed about Twilight. Is it simple enough that we could impart all of these ideas that we already have about each other in a platform that doesn't matter?
That's interesting.
You know, it's not Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
This isn't going to decide the fate of the world.
Vampire werewolf. I mean, it will decide the fate of the world.
It's true.
Vampires fighting vampires.
It's true. And
killing off all the humans. And Jane and I don't know where I want to go with that conversation, but that's a very good point.
Thank you. I try really hard. That's what we want to do with this podcast.
Bring in more conversations like this. So something else that's always interesting to talk about, and that, I mean, it's getting brought up more and more these days, is Stephenie Meyer's Mormon affiliations.
Oh, yeah, because it's Mormon fan fiction.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's also classic fiction.
Yeah.
Fan fiction. Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, that's true. It's fan fiction of fan fiction, and then fan fiction has been written of it that has also been
50 Shades of Grey
into original thing. So it's kind of just come full circle. Maybe it's a snake eating itself. Has it come full circle?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's interesting. I forgot about that. That, yeah, she is very obsessed with Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice. And
which are amazing books.
Yeah, great. I was not obsessed with it as a high schooler like Bella. That was probably where we did not relate. Yeah. I really liked T. Twitches and Harry Potter. Okay.
I was Cheryl and Kenyon. Sandra Brown, Nora Roberts.
Yeah. Oh, I love Sandra Brown.
Yeah, we'll talk about her later.
Yeah, we'll get to her one day.
Eventually. I also think that Twilight... So, Mormon... Oh, gosh, where am I going with this?
Yeah, where are you going to... Yeah, be careful. Step carefully.
So, talk about sex in Twilight.
Because they didn't.
They didn't.
Basically.
So, something that I find really interesting now is this conversation of morality amongst vampires, and especially in Edward.
Yeah.
You really see it. He is continuously tempted. It's almost like an Eve situation. So Bella is Eve, where she just continually keeps tempting Edward, and she's like, no, I want to be a vampire. I want to sleep with you. I want to kiss you. I want to all this sort of stuff. You. And he's like, I can't. No, I cannot. I must save you. I must preserve your humanity. But she's like continuously wearing him down. Yeah. That's a really interesting conversation there. And then eventually they do have sex once.
After they get married.
Then she gets pregnant. And then Renesmee happens.
Oh, God. That was the whole thing.
I mean, so it's interesting going back to our Christine Feehan discussion, too, about vampires being born, not made. Yeah. Most vampiric literature, you will see they are made. Right. They are not born.
I think there's a few exceptions, like how do you pronounce them? The Damphir? From Russia? Yeah, where they're the half vampire, half human. Sometimes they do go off and hunt. Sometimes they become crazy and evil.
They like Nephilim. Depends. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. It depends on the story and what region it's coming from. But for the most part, yeah, you get turned by a vampire before you die, or you're an evil person who turns into one when you die. It's very death-related.
I mean, in Twilight, too, the majority of them are made.
Yeah.
At Carlisle.
Well, all of them, right? Because Renez, whatever.
Oh, she's like the only... No, there's one other. There's one other like her.
Oh, yeah, because there's that short story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's like a spin-off series story thing.
Whatever.
it is interesting that that Stephenie Meyer introduced that. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And I think it became a sort of natural thing coming out maybe of her faith. So, like, you have
marriage
sex.
And kids.
You have sex to have babies, right? To procreate. And so the main characters have sex. And they're not going to have sex for pleasure. They're going to have sex to procreate, even if they aren't expecting it.
Yeah.
But then it also kind of talks about the trials and woes of being a teen mom.
Right.
Because the baby is literally killing her. But then in the ultimate, she has the baby and she becomes a vampire. So all's well.
I think it's interesting that her being a mother is kind of what saves her from the usual temptations that come with vampires. Because one of the things Edward was really worried about, if you remember, was that Bella was going to become a vampire and she was going to really struggle with her control and she was going to kill somebody and really regret it and have to live with that like he's had. But instead, when they let Bella interact with her baby and, you know, they're all hovering and they're all ready to grab the kid, she's like, chill. She's great.
Yeah.
She never, from what I remember, it never seemed like she dealt with cravings the way Edward is constantly like, I'm a monster. I constantly want to drink you dry.
Do the Carpathians deal really strongly with cravings?
Yes.
They do.
And that's actually the point, because the only temptation a Carpathian male has when they haven't found their life mate, there have been over 200 years, they've lost all color, they've lost all hope, they have that constant temptation that they know if they kill when they're drinking, they'll feel something. The fear, too, will add all these endorphins in their victim's bloodstream. They'll feel something. They'll taste something. It's going to be the only sensation they'll ever have. But doing that dooms them, and they'll never have a life mate. They'll constantly be this evil being that has to be hunted by other Carpathians. It's interesting that, vampires are always focused around cravings and wanting what you can't have, what you shouldn't have, and hating yourself for it. Like, it's rare in vampire fiction you see a healthy vampire.
Yeah.
Maybe now.
You see a lot of crazy ones now, too.
A lot of crazy
I love
ones.
those stories.
The crazy ones. I've seen a lot where maybe they're kind of like normal, I guess, if it's a bigger universe. But there hasn't really been a struggler one like Edward, if that makes sense. Or like since Bill.
Yeah. Well, especially not since Twilight and True Blood came out.
Preparation for doing this podcast, I was going through a lot of internet searching and I was kind of looking at things where fans themselves were talking, and I was taken back by how many people were really like, well, Twilight ruined vampires. Like, we're not going to have another vampire because Edward Cullen and Stephenie Meyer just made them soft and gross and annoying and sparkly, and people aren't scared of vampires anymore. It felt very much like people felt like their toy had been taken from them.
Yeah.
And just like, she ruined vampires. They're never going to be like Dracula again. It's too entrenched in our culture that this is what a vampire is now. It's Edward Cullen. It's not anything scary or horrible.
So while I understand where they're coming from, I think it was a natural progression.
Yeah.
That they got there. So we talked in the last episode about Anne Rice and how she really introduced this really sympathetic vampire that you would get and taming the beast sort of situation, and one who feels bad for what they're doing and questions what they're doing. And that was in the 70s. So we have a sympathetic vampire coming in the 70s with Lestat and Louis. And before that, they were, quote unquote, just monsters. Sure, fine, whatever. And then Christine Feehan, as we said earlier in this episode, started really linking the two, the sympathy and the romance, and these kind of more moralistic creatures.
With, I think, they're changing morals in our own society.
And I think it was only so long before we saw a vampire in YA. And in YA, you don't want to see monsters as heroes. You want to see redeemable characters. Yeah. And so that's where you get Edward.
I think it's more that we ask why more often today. Because if you think about the original vampires, they were very much vehicles for what the older people didn't understand.
Yeah, science.
And I think today it's more, I think we have a natural interest in asking why and to really delve into people's character and redeeming and being more like, you know, why does the vampire feel this way? Is there anything in him? It's not just evil. I think today it's much more gray. So I think you're right. It's definitely.
I think too the way that literature is going today, that we are seeing so much more inclusive literature.
That's
that we
true.
want to explore more things. That I think it was, like I said, it's a natural trend, and I think we're gonna maybe start seeing vampires come back. I hope.
Maybe we'll see. They're still there. I don't want to be like, they're never come back.
I mean, I just read one.
Yeah, I see them, though, in universes with lots of supernatural creatures.
Yeah.
I see them as this bigger group of beings, as opposed to just on their own, dealing with their own humanity, their own...
Yeah, you don't really see just vampires. It's like all supernatural now.
You've got werewolves, shifters, fairies, demons. Like, Kresley Cole is really famous for her Immortal series, where it's just about every single race of being. She's got Valkyrie, she's got demons, she's got fairy, she's got lots of really cool things.
And I think, too, that we talk about how these universes just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Where I think the Sookie Stackhouse series, so Charlene Harris, she started that way.
Yeah.
She introduced right off the bat, she's like, there's fairies, there's vampires, there's werewolves, there's like all these creatures.
And they're
all smoking hot. Yeah, everybody's banging everybody.
Yeah, you're right, that's more important.
They all live in Louisiana. Louisiana. As much as we like to complain about how series are getting bigger and they're getting way too complex, I think it gives more readership. And I think it gives somebody something to look forward to. So, like, if I don't necessarily want to read a vampire story, I can skip ahead 5 books.
Yeah, to the werewolf.
A lot of these, too, I mean, Sookie Stackhouse, not so much. Twilight, not so much. But, like, Feehan, you can read them totally out of order.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. I think that's why there's so much info dumping.
Yeah.
But, you know, you just focus on the couple instead of the weird plot that's going on around them of the vampire splinter in her ribs, which was a weird thing, or a real thing. She had a split. It was a thing.
Oh, okay.
That's what I mean. She's got
I'm making a very confused face.
And I'm like, see, that's what I mean. You just skip all those pages. There's a lot of weird action scenes that's literally them inside somebody else's body healing them.
So that's something, too. I think that men... We talked in the last episode, I think, I don't remember anymore, about how more men are reading.
Yeah.
I think vampiric romance would be something that men would really get into.
Okay.
Because there's a lot more fight scenes. There are a lot more fight scenes. There's a lot more blood. Yeah. You have all these different characters, and it would almost appeal, I think, to men.
That's really interesting. Because my first thought would be they wouldn't.
Really? Okay.
Because of the things we talked about how it's written for a female gaze.
And they're sexualizing,
the predators and sexualizing the men, so they're strong and rich and fabulous, and maybe the guys would be emasculated by that, maybe.
See, but in the Christine Feehan I read, she doesn't really tame him.
That's true. They compromise, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe that's really what we need. We need more compromise. But so I think we're both right, in a way.
Yeah.
So, hey, if you're a guy listening to this, hello, thank you. And
who are you? Yeah. Are you single?
How much vampire do you read?
What else do you read? Sorry, I'll stop now. Okay. So that's something else, too. A lot of people talk about how inappropriate it is for younger readers to read vampires because they are very sexual creatures.
And how many think pieces did we see about the dangers of Twilight on young teenage girls?
And I mean, I mentioned in the last episode, you didn't have any idea of this, how vampiric biting is like just metaphor for penetration.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you say it out loud.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
and I mean, if you think when we were teenagers, like hickeys were a big deal. You okay over there?
Yeah, it was just too funny.
Chortling too hard in the corner. And I think it is, they are very sexual. They are very, like, we do often see, even if it's not explicitly stated, the idea of a life mate with vampires. Like, this vampire has lived for centuries, and then he finds you, and he's, like, all into you. They're all into
special.
you. You're special.
One powerful being is all...
Bless your heart.
Into you.
I don't think it's... I mean, I'm obviously going to not say I don't think it's dangerous. Or I am obviously going to say I don't think it's dangerous. But, first off, people who say that, you need to read a book.
More often.
You need to read more books.
I think people don't give enough benefit of the doubt to teenage girls or women in general. I mean, Twilight is not their only influence. I think if it's something... If
Twilight is their only influence, then we have more to talk about.
Then you can be worried if that's literally all they're obsessed with. But, you know, teenage girls have friends, they have parents, they have family, they have other interests, they have other shows. This is not the sole foundation of their...
They aren't living in a microcosm.
Exactly, yeah. They've got all these other things interacting and influencing them. I think they'll take out of Twilight what's useful to them. if there is anything negative they take out of that, I hope there's somebody in their lives that can kind of be like, Edward Cullen is not like
the best
example.
No.
But hold on to how you feel and look for that, maybe.
Yeah.
Or, find somebody who is either the opposite of Edward or maybe the good things that he does do.
So, and here's the thing, too, is that Twilight can totally be a gateway drug.
Yeah.
To put it in a bad term.
That too, yeah.
So, I mean, after Twilight came out, we saw Vampire Diaries. We saw the Fallen series, which is all about fallen angels.
But it's Twilight. And
yeah, it's
angels,
pretty
basically.
much, especially the movie. It's just Twilight.
Mm-hmm.
But there were all these different series that had some really good characters in them and some really good arcs that I think you can easily make your way to from Twilight.
Yeah, I think people are just paranoid. I think a lot of people don't have much faith in teenage girls. I definitely did not go out and find an Edward Cullen when I liked Twilight. First of all, there is no teenage boy who's like Edward Cullen in real life.
Definitely not.
I think that alone is a safety measure.
Yeah.
And there's other things in the books. I mean, as much as there was all that awful romance stuff, and there was a lot of awful romance stuff, I do think it was a good example of Jacob really being there for his friend.
And it was a good talk of consent, too.
Yeah.
And wanting something and being okay with wanting something.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to introduce it. I mean, so we are obviously leaning one very specific way.
Yeah.
And if you disagree, that's totally fine. It's good to open up those conversations young, I think. And like we have both said, we were already reading other things by the time we read this. So,
and to be fair, I think this is a lot better than
some of the stuff we did read.
Some of the stuff that you could have found at that age.
Yeah.
And I know parents, you probably think you know what your kids are looking at and watching.
You really don't.
You have no idea, and it's gotten worse. I knew how to sneak around all that stuff. I think it's better to embrace it as opposed to fighting against it, because that's going to make them want to read it more.
Yeah.
I think that stereotype is very much true. If you're like, no Twilight for you, then they're going to read it even more to spite you.
Very much so. Yeah, I think Twilight did a lot of good things. Even though we like to hate on it, it did do a lot of good things. And for fiction in general, it did eventually lead to 50 Shades.
Which is a whole other story.
It's a whole other discussion.
Whole other story.
We'll get there. Don't worry.
That's
but
something.
The long story short of that is it opened up the ebook publishing game, which opened up the Kindle smut territory, which opened up these amazing conversations we're having and consent, inclusivity, just these amazing stories about racial tension. And it's all wrapped up in romance. And I really don't think it could have happened without Twilight.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a big statement, but I really think that's the case.
I'm not ready to go that far, but I believe you. But I'll I see your point. I'll think about it
when we
some
talk
more.
about 50 Shades.
We'll see. Okay.
We'll get into it.
Okay.
That's way down the line, though.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for that. Well, so pretty much that wraps up our conversation of vampires.
For
now.
Ooh, who knows?
There's no way to neatly wrap that in a bow. There's a lot to talk about that, a lot to unpack. Mm-hmm. But for now, that's what we have. Thanks for listening to us blather on. What are we talking about next month, Jen?
Oh, we're talking about something really exciting.
Oh?
Maybe not exciting. I'm excited to talk about it because it's really bugging me now that I've noticed it. Okay. We are going to look at age differences in romance.
Ooh.
Because it's something that is occurring to me the older I get, the more I look at this stuff.
They're all younger than us.
They're all younger than us.
And the men are all older than us.
Yeah, there's a big thing of heroines being in their early 20s.
Teenagers.
Basically. And the men being let's say early 30s.
35, 34.
Sometimes even up to 40s. And I think it's a very interesting phenomenon. Because it's not just Kindle smut. I'm seeing bigger gaps actually in Kindle smut.
Especially if we look at classic romance.
Very much mainstream.
Yeah. And then of course you have the opposite side of it where older women, younger men is hardly... It's non-existent.
It's non-existent. It exists in erotica, or it exists in really creepy fiction where it's his teacher.
Yeah.
And that's very illegal. It's not romantic.
No, that's pedophilia, people.
No.
So we're going to do things a little different next month if you're interested in listening to us. The first one, we're going to be talking about older men and fiction and comparing fiction and that. The second one, we're going to be talking about older women. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Thanks, guys. I hope this podcast didn't suck.
Great way to end it.
All right, keep raging on.
Bye, guys.